In 2015, a daring escape from a high-security prison in Mexico took place, a break that seemed impossible on paper. The prison, called El Chapo's Almoloya prison, was known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. Among its most infamous residents was Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the notorious leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Despite being housed in one of Mexico's most secure facilities, he managed to pull off an escape that left authorities scratching their heads. El Chapo was first arrested in 1993 but had a history of escaping from Mexican prisons. His first escape, in 2001, was made possible with the help of a bribe and an ingenious plan that involved a laundry cart. After being recaptured in 2014, authorities placed him in a maximum security facility to ensure he would never escape again. But once again, they underestimated his resourcefulness. On July 11, 2015, El Chapo pulled off his most audacious escape yet. This time, his escape was aided by a mile-long tunnel that led directly from his cell to a house miles away. The tunnel was equipped with lights, ventilation, and a motorcycle on tracks to speed up his escape. It was a well-thought-out plan involving several people within the prison, and the escape was executed flawlessly. The tunnel itself was a marvel of engineering. It was dug from underneath El Chapo's cell, which was located in the most secure area of the prison. The construction of the tunnel required careful planning, tools, and an intimate knowledge of the prison's layout. The tunnel's entrance, which was hidden inside a shower stall, went undetected by guards for months. What made this escape even more impressive was the level of sophistication involved. It was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It had been in the works for a long time. El Chapo had received help from a group of engineers and his associates outside the prison. The authorities had no idea what they were dealing with, and this lapse in oversight would cost them dearly. As El Chapo made his way through the tunnel, he encountered numerous obstacles, but his familiarity with the prison's design and the help of his collaborators ensured that he would make it through. The tunnel ended in a house under construction, and from there, he was whisked away to a safe house, far from the reach of the Mexican authorities. The authorities, of course, were stunned when they discovered that El Chapo had escaped. The Mexican government was under pressure to apprehend him quickly, but the extent of the escape raised questions about the state of Mexico's prison system. How could a man of such notoriety escape from one of the most secure prisons in the country? And how could such an elaborate plan be set into motion without anyone noticing? The escape sparked an international manhunt. El Chapo was the most wanted man in the world at the time, and governments across the globe were eager to capture him. He had been known for his violent tactics and ruthless criminal operations, and his escape added fuel to the fire of the ongoing battle against the Sinaloa cartel. Mexican authorities quickly launched a massive operation to track down El Chapo. They put up roadblocks, set up checkpoints, and even enlisted the help of the U.S. government, which had its own vested interest in capturing the drug lord. The Mexican government's failure to prevent the escape had made them look weak, and they were determined to rectify the situation. El Chapo, however, proved to be as elusive as ever. Despite the intense manhunt, he managed to stay one step ahead of the authorities. He had a network of loyal supporters who helped him stay out of sight, and his knowledge of the Mexican terrain gave him a significant advantage. The search for El Chapo would go on for months. The authorities were frustrated, and rumors swirled about the involvement of high-ranking officials in helping him escape. Was there corruption within the prison system? How could a man like El Chapo escape from the most secure facility in Mexico without the help of insiders? As time passed, the Sinaloa cartel continued its operations, with El Chapo at the helm, though he remained in hiding. The cartel was a powerful force in the world of drug trafficking, and El Chapo's leadership had made it one of the most formidable criminal organizations on the planet. His escape only solidified his status as a legendary figure in the world of organized crime. However, El Chapo's time on the run was not meant to last forever. As months went by, his movements became more erratic. The authorities were closing in on him, and his once sophisticated network began to unravel. His associates were arrested, and his resources were slowly diminishing. The final chapter of El Chapo's escape came in January 2016, when he was recaptured in a joint operation between Mexican and U.S. authorities. The operation was a culmination of months of work, and it took place in the town of Los Mochis, Sinaloa. El Chapo had been hiding in a house, and it was here that the authorities finally cornered him. When El Chapo was captured, the world was once again reminded of the lengths to which he would go to escape capture. His escape had been a calculated and audacious act, and it had taken the combined efforts of both the Mexican and U.S. governments to bring him back to justice. But his capture was not the end of his story. El Chapo's capture was followed by a swift extradition to the United States, where he faced a slew of charges related to his criminal activities. The U.S. government had long sought his extradition, and his return marked the beginning of a new chapter in his legal battles. He was convicted of multiple charges, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and involvement in organized crime. In 2019, El Chapo was sentenced to life in prison and an additional 30 years. His conviction was a significant blow to the Sinaloa cartel, but the organization's influence did not wane. His sons, known as the Chapitos, took over the cartel's operations, continuing the work that El Chapo had started. The story of El Chapo's escape is one of the most incredible in modern criminal history. It serves as a reminder of the lengths to which criminals will go to evade justice. But it also highlights the vulnerabilities in the prison system and the challenges faced by law enforcement in capturing high-profile criminals. The escape also shed light on the scale of corruption within the Mexican prison system. How could such an elaborate plan unfold without anyone noticing? There were suspicions that high-ranking officials had been involved in helping El Chapo escape. It was a scandal that rocked the Mexican government and prompted calls for prison reform. El Chapo's escape was not the first time a high-profile prisoner had escaped from a Mexican prison. In 2010, another notorious drug lord, Arturo Beltran-Leyva, escaped from the same prison complex. This raised serious questions about the effectiveness of Mexico's prison system in housing dangerous criminals. The Mexican government, under pressure from both domestic and international sources, promised to overhaul its prison system after El Chapo's escape. They increased security measures at prisons across the country and sought to root out corruption within the system. But for many, the damage had already been done. The escape had exposed critical weaknesses in the country's approach to handling high-profile criminals. The escape also had far-reaching consequences for the U.S.-Mexico relationship. The U.S. had long sought to extradite El Chapo, and his escape had complicated matters. It took months for both countries to coordinate efforts to capture him, and his eventual recapture was seen as a victory for international law enforcement cooperation. El Chapo's escape was a moment in time that would not be forgotten. It demonstrated the incredible ingenuity and determination of one of the world's most dangerous criminals. His story would become a case study in both criminal ingenuity and the vulnerabilities of high-security prisons. His escape also served as a cautionary tale for other governments around the world. No matter how secure a facility may seem, a determined and well-resourced individual can find a way out. El Chapo's story is a reminder of the ever-present challenges faced by law enforcement in maintaining control over the world's most dangerous criminals. Despite his capture and conviction, El Chapo's legacy continues to loom large. His escape cemented his place as one of the most infamous criminals in history, and his influence over the Sinaloa cartel remains undeniable. The cartel continues to operate in various parts of the world, and El Chapo's escape only served to further embolden those who followed in his footsteps. El Chapo's story is a complex one, filled with twists and turns. From his rise to power in the world of organized crime to his incredible escape and eventual capture, his life is a testament to both his cunning and the failings of the systems meant to contain him. The escape also raised questions about the nature of criminal enterprises and the people who lead them. El Chapo's ability to escape from prison was not just about his ability to bribe officials or dig tunnels. It was about his leadership and the loyalty he commanded from those around him. His escape was a reflection of the power and influence he had built within the world of organized crime. The fact that El Chapo was able to escape from a high-security prison shows the extent to which he was willing to go to maintain his freedom. It was a calculated risk, but one that paid off. For a time, El Chapo was untouchable, and his escape served as a reminder of just how dangerous he could be. Ultimately, El Chapo's escape was not just a failure of the prison system. It was a failure of the Mexican government to properly handle one of the most dangerous men in the world. His escape exposed weaknesses in their approach to dealing with criminals of his stature and left a stain on their record. The world watched as El Chapo's escape played out, and it served as a reminder of the growing power of criminal organizations and the lengths they will go to maintain control. The escape was a testament to the ingenuity of those involved, but it was also a sobering reminder of the ongoing fight between law enforcement and the criminal underworld. In the end, El Chapo's escape was a story of failure, resilience, and the complexities of the criminal justice system. It raised questions that would linger long after his recapture, questions about the role of corruption, the influence of criminal organizations, and the vulnerability of even the most secure prisons. Though El Chapo is behind bars today, his legacy endures. His escape continues to inspire both admiration and fear, as it highlights the extent to which the criminal underworld will go to achieve its goals. His story is a reminder that the fight against organized crime is far from over. For those who knew El Chapo personally, his escape was a moment that defined his criminal career. It was a bold move that solidified his reputation and showed just how dangerous he truly was. And for law enforcement, it was a wake-up call, one that would lead to further scrutiny of the criminal justice system. El Chapo's story is far from over. Even after his recapture, his name continues to be synonymous with the power and influence of the Sinaloa cartel. His escape remains one of the most audacious acts in the history of organized crime. The ultimate irony of El Chapo's escape is that, despite his success in evading capture for a time, he was ultimately brought to justice. His escape only delayed the inevitable, and his eventual capture was the culmination of an international effort to bring him to justice. His escape continues to be a source of fascination for people around the world. It is a story of a man who refused to be contained, who used every tool at his disposal to achieve freedom, and who ultimately paid the price for his defiance. The lessons of El Chapo's escape continue to resonate with law enforcement agencies around the world. It is a reminder that the fight against organized crime is complex and ongoing, and that even the most secure prisons are vulnerable to those with the right resources and determination. As the world moves forward, El Chapo's escape will remain a cautionary tale, a story of how even the most powerful criminal can find a way out when the system fails to hold him. And it will continue to be a symbol of the power of criminal organizations and the lengths they will go to maintain control. El Chapo's story is one of defiance, resilience, and ingenuity. It is a story of a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his freedom and who would leave a trail of destruction in his wake. And though his escape was temporary, the impact it had on the world of organized crime is permanent. El Chapo's legacy as a criminal mastermind has been cemented, not just because of his strategic brilliance, but because of his ability to inspire loyalty in those around him. His ability to maintain control over a vast criminal empire, despite the numerous risks and obstacles he faced, speaks volumes about his capabilities. His story has become a blueprint for others in the criminal world, showing that with enough cunning and determination, almost anything is possible. The world El Chapo operated in was one of brutality, power, and control. His rise to power was not simply about drugs, it was about influence. He learned early on how to manipulate people and institutions to his advantage, and that would become a cornerstone of his empire. This wasn't just a man selling drugs. This was a man running a business, a ruthless and highly effective one, built on violence and fear. His escape only reinforced the perception that he was a man above the law, someone who could outsmart even the most sophisticated security systems. To many, El Chapo's ability to escape from a maximum security prison felt like a direct challenge to the authorities. It showed the world that he had the resources and the ambition to defy even the most determined efforts to contain him. In the years following his capture, many questions have been raised about the extent of corruption that allowed El Chapo to escape. Despite being housed in one of Mexico's most secure prisons, he had the means to build a tunnel that defied logic and security. There were whispers of bribery, inside help, and a system that was too easily manipulated. These questions only deepened the sense that El Chapo was untouchable, an idea that he reinforced every time he escaped. The fact that his escape was not an isolated incident, but rather a culmination of a well-executed plan, was a reminder of the level of sophistication that El Chapo brought to the table. The tunnel he used wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a work of engineering, a meticulously planned route that bypassed every safeguard in place. This was a man who was always thinking 2 steps ahead, whether he was making millions in drug sales or planning an escape. For many, El Chapo's story is a modern-day myth, one where a criminal rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful figures in the world. His ability to command such a vast empire, all while staying several steps ahead of the authorities, made him an almost legendary figure. And even after his capture, his reputation continued to grow, solidifying his place in criminal history. Yet, his escape didn't just put him back in the headlines. It highlighted the systemic issues within the Mexican government and law enforcement. The fact that a man of El Chapo's caliber could escape from one of the most secure prisons in the world speaks to the vulnerability of the systems in place. It also calls into question the resources allocated to ensuring that criminals like him stay behind bars. This escape also served as a wake-up call for the global community. It showed that, despite the efforts of international law enforcement, drug cartels remained a formidable force. Even in the face of heightened security measures, criminals like El Chapo continued to operate with impunity. The lessons learned from his escape became a cautionary tale for the future of global law enforcement. For the Mexican government, El Chapo's escape was an embarrassment. The fallout was immediate, with criticism coming from both domestic and international sources. The Mexican authorities had long struggled with corruption within the prison system, and El Chapo's escape brought this issue into sharp focus. It was a failure that shook the public's confidence in the government's ability to maintain control over its criminal justice system. Even after his recapture, the authorities remained under pressure. The public and media alike were quick to point out that the initial escape could have been prevented with proper security measures. There were calls for greater transparency, for investigations into the involvement of prison officials, and for a complete overhaul of the prison system. But many questioned whether such reforms would ever truly take place. El Chapo's escape also exposed the limitations of the Mexican prison system. It wasn't just the design of the facility that failed, it was the overall structure of the system that allowed for such a plan to unfold. High-profile criminals like El Chapo were often given privileges that were unheard of for the average inmate. This created an environment ripe for exploitation, and El Chapo's escape was the result of years of manipulating the system. The recapture of El Chapo in 2016 was a dramatic moment, but it didn't undo the damage that had been done. His escape had left a mark on the Mexican government, the criminal justice system, and on the global community. It was a reminder that, despite the best efforts of law enforcement, criminals with the right resources and determination could evade capture, at least for a while. After his recapture, El Chapo faced charges not just in Mexico but in the United States. His trial, which began in 2018, was a spectacle in its own right, drawing attention from all over the world. The trial highlighted not just the extent of his criminal empire but also the global reach of the Sinaloa cartel. El Chapo's operations spanned countries and continents, with his cartel being one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. The trial was a major event, and it revealed the inner workings of El Chapo's empire. It was a fascinating look at how a criminal organization operated on such a grand scale. Evidence presented in court showed how El Chapo had managed to expand his empire through violence, bribery, and sheer force of will. His ability to maintain control over his cartel, even from prison, was a testament to his organizational skills and his ability to inspire loyalty. But even with his conviction, El Chapo's story didn't end there. His time in U.S. custody was just the beginning of a new chapter. There were still questions surrounding his criminal activities and the extent of his empire. The Sinaloa cartel, although weakened by his capture, was still a formidable force, and El Chapo's influence was still felt even behind bars. The trial also had broader implications for the U.S.-Mexico relationship. The capture and trial of El Chapo were seen as a success for international law enforcement cooperation. However, it also highlighted the challenges that both countries faced in dealing with transnational criminal organizations. The case was a reminder that while one man may be caught, the larger criminal network he built continues to thrive. The saga of El Chapo's escape and capture raised uncomfortable questions about the effectiveness of modern prisons and the balance between security and human rights. While there is no doubt that El Chapo needed to be incarcerated, the system that allowed his escape was clearly flawed. His story called attention to the broader issue of prison reform and the need for greater transparency in the way high-risk criminals are managed. The Sinaloa cartel's operations didn't stop with El Chapo's capture. His sons, Ivan and Alfredo, known as the Chapitos, assumed control over the cartel's activities. They continued to expand the cartel's operations, filling the power vacuum left by their father's absence. While El Chapo's leadership had been central to the cartel's success, the transition of power to his sons proved that the cartel's infrastructure was more than just one man. El Chapo's rise to power was not an accident. He built his empire through careful planning, manipulation, and violence. He was a man who understood the nature of power and how to exploit it to his advantage. His escape, in many ways, was the culmination of this understanding, a testament to his ability to control the situation, even when it seemed impossible. Despite his eventual capture, El Chapo's mythos lives on. His story has been told countless times, through documentaries, books, and even films. He has become a symbol of both the power and the fragility of criminal organizations. His life and escape continue to fascinate people around the world, drawing attention to the inner workings of one of the most dangerous cartels in history. The story of El Chapo is also one of contradictions. He was a ruthless killer, yet a master of strategy. He was a criminal mastermind, yet he was caught because of his own arrogance. His ability to escape from prison was a testament to his cunning, but it also demonstrated the limitations of the systems meant to contain him. El Chapo's escape was a bold statement about the limits of power. Even though he was incarcerated in one of the most secure prisons in Mexico, he was able to break free. It was a reminder that no system is infallible and that there will always be cracks in the foundation. For El Chapo, those cracks were opportunities to exploit, and he did so with deadly efficiency. His escape also revealed the deep-rooted issues within the prison system. It was clear that the system was not designed to deal with criminals of El Chapo's caliber. The fact that a man like him could orchestrate such an elaborate escape pointed to the flaws in prison security, but also to the broader issue of systemic corruption. For those who watched El Chapo's escape unfold, it was both a shocking and a thrilling moment. It was the ultimate display of criminal ingenuity, a reminder that the rules don't apply to everyone. But for those who worked to capture him, it was a humiliating setback. It was a moment that would resonate for years to come. The hunt for El Chapo after his escape was nothing short of a global effort. Law enforcement agencies from around the world worked together to track him down, sharing information and resources. The operation was a testament to the power of international cooperation in the fight against organized crime. But despite the best efforts of authorities, El Chapo remained elusive for months. The final chapter of El Chapo's story was marked by his recapture and extradition to the United States. His capture in 2016 was the culmination of a massive manhunt that involved multiple countries. It marked the end of his reign as one of the most powerful drug lords in the world, but it also marked the beginning of a new phase in his life, one behind bars, facing a lifetime of imprisonment. For El Chapo, the end was inevitable. His empire had been built on violence and fear, and eventually those forces caught up with him. His capture may have marked the end of his freedom, but it didn't end the legacy of the Sinaloa cartel. The cartel continues to operate, albeit with a weaker leadership structure. Even behind bars, El Chapo remains a symbol of defiance and power. His escape was one of the most audacious in criminal history, and it is a story that will be remembered for generations to come. It is a testament to the lengths criminals will go to in order to secure their freedom, and a reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement in containing the world's most dangerous criminals. El Chapo's escape was not just an event. It was a moment that captured the imagination of the world. It was a reminder that, no matter how secure a system may seem, there will always be those who are willing to find ways around it. And in the case of El Chapo, it was a story that would go down in history as one of the greatest escapes ever attempted. As the world moves forward, El Chapo's story will continue to serve as a cautionary tale for both criminals and law enforcement. It is a story of one man's ingenuity and resourcefulness, but also a story of systemic failure. It is a reminder that no matter how advanced the technology or security measures, criminals like El Chapo will always find ways to challenge the system. In the end, El Chapo's prison break stands as a testament to the dangers posed by criminal masterminds, the vulnerabilities of our prison systems, and the endless battle between law enforcement and those who operate outside the law.